Hey guys, thanks for tuning in, and this is going to be a kind of new type of video for me in that I'm alone and I'm not joined by any of the gurus and super smart people that usually accompany me in my videos. So no Eric Helms, no Lyle McDonald in this video, it's just me. But I'm coming at you with some nutritional advice basically because I just finished my cut, which lasted about 6 or 7 weeks and took me down to about 10% body fat, realistically speaking. Although some people in YouTube might, of course, disagree with that evaluation. So it's all about basically how you can make that calorie deficit a lot more bearable and a lot more enjoyable for yourself. And I really think that these nutritional food choice and behavior related strategies that I'm about to share can make a world of a difference for some of you. So let's get into it without any further ado. The number one most important thing when you go on a cut is to maintain your volume, right?
Volume is only something that's going to benefit you if you can recover from it. And when you are dieting, your ability to recover is obviously reduced.
No. I'm not talking about that kind of volume this time. I'm not talking about training volume this time. I'm talking about food volume, the actual quantity of food that you're consuming. Why is that so critically important? Well, let's start by saying that as you're dieting, you will be inevitably less satisfied, right? Well, is that true though? Well, actually, interestingly, there have been experiments where they put people in different groups and had them eat an unlimited amount of food, but they varied the caloric density of the foods that they had access to. So some people had access to much more calorific foods than others. And what they found is that, of course, people eating the more calorically dense foods ate more total calories, but the actual quantity of food that they consumed in the two different groups were almost exactly the same. And the main takeaway message from this study is that you're not really going for a given number of calories per se when you're eating. It's much more so about the actual food quantity, food volume that you're consuming. Another similar experiment was when they gave two groups of people two different kinds of smoothies that looked identical, but one of them had extra air injected into it. So some portion of the volume was made up for by injecting air into it. So of course it was a lot less calories than the other smoothie. And what they found is people rated the smoothie as equally satiating. And again, the takeaway message here is that basically you can be just as satisfied eating a lower number of calories so long as you're controlling for the food volume, the food quantity. So I really do firmly believe that when you're going in a cut, your number one priority should be to preserve the food volume that you're eating. And the easiest way to do it is to simply make some smart food switches. So switch out some of your higher calorie foods with lower calorie ones, and this can actually go a very long way. So if you're eating a lot of starches and bread and rice, you can switch some of that out with veggies or carrots, for example, which are similar in texture to potatoes, but of course like half the calories. Instead of bananas or apples, you can eat, for example, lower calorie berries, and these food choices actually reduce your calories very, very easily. Now, the next point, which is kind of related, is dumb and smart food choices. Now, I know that this title is a little bit provocative, but I really do think that some food options during a cut is just asking for trouble. And conversely, some food choices are actually very, very conducive to a good fat loss diet. So what do I mean here? Foods such as big quantities of oils and butters that you would use during cooking or as salad dressing. Of course, they enhance the flavor of your food somewhat, but they just contribute to an enormous amount of calories for very little satiety in return. I mean, think about it. That tablespoon of olive oil that you put in your salad, you could actually eat another salad from that caloric content, or you could eat half a kilo of strawberries. I mean, it's pretty easy to see which one is more satiating. So during a cut, it's actually a lot more important to just not be hungry and actually give up some of the flavor enhancement that you would otherwise get. I think the same thing applies to a lesser extent for foods like rice or bread. Now, for some people, these foods are actually satiating, but I think universally almost everybody would find a giant bowl of veggies more satiating than that tiny cup of rice. So I highly recommend that you do a little experimentation there. Now, some food choices that work wonders are, for example, strawberries, which is by far my carb of choice during a cut, mostly because it's fibrous, dense, the texture is pretty much perfect, and you can basically eat them until you're blue in the face because they're like 25 calories per 100 gram. Protein sources, you could go for lower fat but very dense forms of cottage cheeses, in some countries known as quark, which is very dense, very, very filling, and very low calorie. Interestingly, eggs, for example, in a fried form, they're not very filling, at least for me. But if you microwave them in a bowl, it kind of gives this fluffy, dense texture, which is kind of versatile actually. You can even eat them with sweet dishes with fruits, for example, and it translates very well. Other kind of advanced tricks, you could use psyllium husk or guar gum for kind of as a thickening agent for certain foods, and they really enhance the satiating effect of the food for almost no calories in exchange. Now, next point is macronutrient composition, and I have to say it with two big disclaimers. One, this is something that worked nicely for me, but it doesn't mean that it will work for you because there's a huge inter-individual variability in this regard. And the other thing is, this is only for people going down to a reasonable body fat percentage. So sub 10% for guys and sub 20% for girls. This is obviously not something that would be applicable for contest prep dieting. This is only for a couple of weeks or even shorter period of time to do a shortcut. So I found for me personally that lower fat diet is just more satiating, probably because it allows me to max out on food volume more. This especially was true when I was going very low on calories, which would be a very low calorie intake for me. When I really wanted to dig, then I actually went down to as low as like 15 grams of fat per day or even lower. Now, this is only something for a short period of time, so across the weeks I definitely started to feel if I kept my fat intake excessively low. But nevertheless, something that might be interesting for you to hear. Next thing is meal timing and specifically intermittent fasting. Now, before you start rolling your eyes, this is not going to be a video where I'm declaring the amazing benefits of intermittent fasting and how it freed me from the pressures of modern society and made me a better human being. But there are some nice benefits of it that actually helped me. So what I mean specifically is how it helped distributing my hunger across the day. So I personally like to view hunger, or simply the psychological desire to consume more food, as a little bag that you're carrying with yourself every day, and that bag is going to fill up to a certain extent each and every day. But it's up to you how you're basically timing how that bag is filling up. For example, if you're eating a small meal every couple of hours, then you're always depleting the content of this proverbial hunger bag, but it always fills up rather quickly as well. And so what I'm doing by not eating for the first couple of hours upon waking is letting that bag fill up quite a bit actually, maybe even spill over a little bit. But then once I start eating in the second part of the day, that content only gets lower and lower, and actually when it reaches the minimum of its content is when I would actually want to go to bed, which for me personally is the time of the day when I tolerate an empty stomach the least. So when I actually want to go to bed and want to slow down, then it's very important to me to feel satisfied. And additionally, a plus point here is that in the first half of the day, there are actually quite a few tools that you can use to suppress your appetite. So even though your hunger would normally creep up, you can take advantage of these tools. So for example, caffeine. You can abuse a little bit caffeine in the first half of the day, and obviously this would not be something that you would want to do later in the day when you would actually want to slow down. Similarly, consuming a lot of fluids is a nice appetite suppressing agent, which is perfectly fine in the first half of the day because it's not a problem that you're running to the toilet to pee all the time. But when you actually want to slow down and go to sleep, it's not very good to consume a lot of fluids then because you don't want to jump out of bed all the time to run to the toilet. So that's it about intermittent fasting. It's not magic, but for some of you, it might actually help for these reasons. Next point is mindfulness. And of course, this is something that we talked about with Mario Tomic when he was on my channel. And it's pretty well known that when you're distracted and not focusing on your food, then you will eat more. But actually there is quite a bit of literature on this, and that when people talk with each other while they're eating or they're watching TV or reading a newspaper, they will simply eat more and they will eat for longer. Shockingly, actually, it's also been shown that even by listening to something, which was kind of a disappointment for me, but anecdotally it kind of made sense looking back, that even listening to like a podcast or radio show will also make people eat longer. And I've been super guilty of all of these things. I've been always watching videos and TV and listening to stuff while I was eating. And actually recently I just decided to give it a go. Try cutting all of that stuff out, which was kind of hard initially, but focus on my food, like actually really deeply focus on it. And what I found is that by not being distracted, the satisfaction that I gained from that meal was just staggeringly more than when I was distracted. I mean, honestly, my meals were so much more satiating as if I ate an additional couple of hundred calories. And that's not an exaggeration. So what I've been doing lately actually is taking it to a whole new level and actually focusing on my meal so hard as if it was a meditation. So from the point of cutting down my piece of food to the point when it was going down, which sounds kind of gross, focus on it really deeply, and it's been a whole new experience. So much more satiating, so much more satisfied. I was hungry less after my meals, and I got hungry less quickly after my meals. So really recommend trying it, especially when you're on a diet. And it also helps you to be less food focused, which is a great thing. Next thing, which is a little bit less intuitive, but if you're thinking about it, it's actually pretty logical, is making yourself busy. As we know, boredom eating and just eating because you have nothing better to do is a pretty big component in modern society of why we're overeating as a society as a whole, basically, because food is always a new, novel stimuli that gives you that instant gratification and that instant nice stimulus when you're bored. Obviously, this is not a very good thing in general because A, why are you bored? I mean, YOLO, for Christ's sake. But secondly, during a diet, you actually want to preserve your meal times for times when you actually are hungry and when you actually want to consume food. I mean, don't just eat because you have nothing better to do. I mean, you're wasting your precious calories. So to avoid this, what I did is actually schedule every minute of my idle time as well, just as if it was a work day or my work hours. So what I did is basically in a spreadsheet, wrote down for myself exactly when I would do what. And I left no time for being bored and when I was doing nothing. And I even put on a little bit of a scientist hat and noted down for myself the times of the day when I would start to think about food very strongly. And at the end of the day, I basically made a strategy for the next day when this time of the day would come around. And I always found that during these times, I would actually get kind of bored and tired of doing the same thing for a long period of time and wanted a quick, novel stimuli. So for the next days, for these times, I scheduled something very engaging, which left no room for just being bored and thinking about food. Next thing, which is kind of woo-woo, but trust me, it can actually make a big difference, and it definitely did for me, is self-talk sometimes, even out loud if necessary. For example, sometimes I would just start to get a bit obsessed about just the fact that I'm dieting, and I would start to get into these self-victimizing thoughts of oh my god, I'm so low on energy, and I've been in a calorie deficit for multiple weeks now, and oh my god. And during these times, for example, when I was driving in the traffic, I would start to talk out loud to myself and say like, look, dude, I mean, you're doing this for yourself. Nobody is asking you to diet. You're doing this because this is important to you. Your family members and your friends already think that you're too skinny, but for some reason for you, it's important to get that extra half of ab muscle to show. You're doing this for yourself, so you're a big boy, suck it up. You're not gonna die because you're in a 500 calorie deficit. You're still eating plenty of food to feel good and get good energy levels. So stop complaining, do your thing, and yeah. So these things really, really helped. Whenever I did this, after that, I just felt so much better and so much empowered. And basically that gave me another week of problem-free dieting. So I know it sounds woo-woo, but trust me, sometimes it's worthy to try it out. Next thing is actually focusing on weekly calorie deficits as opposed to being super focused on specific days. And it's similar to the concept of you weighing yourself every day and taking a weekly average as opposed to obsessing over 1 day of weight fluctuation. And similarly, I would recommend that you take note of your caloric intake each and every day and take an average at the end of the week. And so you see how your weekly caloric deficit added up across the days. This actually helps a lot by being less obsessed basically about hitting your caloric number each and every day perfectly, and also helps to ease your mind if one day you overate a little bit. For example, I almost every week did something stupid, so overate by, you know, a couple of hundred or even more calories, and it kind of eased my mind to see that, okay, if I just reduce my calories for the next couple of days a little bit, then it makes up for this little, you know, error perfectly. So yeah, it's a little bit more data entering, but for easing your mind, I think it's worth the trade-off for many of you guys. Next thing is making smart trade-offs. And what I mean by that is simply on some days, giving up some aspects of your diet that would be optimal in exchange for hitting your calories better. So what I did, for example, on some days is that in order to hit my calories more accurately, I gave up on the optimal level of protein intake for myself. So even though I should hit about 140, 150 grams to be optimal for myself, I only hit 120 or even lower on some days in order to actually hit my caloric targets. I did similar things with my workout nutrition, for example. So I know that in theory, it would be good to eat 1 or 2 hours before and 1 or 2 hours after my workout. So don't leave a huge gap when you're not eating anything around your workouts. But on some days, I actually completely abandoned the concept of proper workout nutrition in order to hit my macros better. So yes, on those days, I might not have gotten the absolute most amount of benefits from my resistance training, but it allowed me to hit my calories better for that day. And this is something that I think is worth keeping in mind, that when you're dieting, really, it's all about the calorie deficit, and some things can actually suffer a little bit because it's a temporary thing. It will be over soon, and it will just go quicker if you're sticking to your calorie deficit better. So this is all, guys. This is all the tips that I had. I hope this is helpful. None of these are magic. I mean, this is all about just allowing you to hit your calorie deficit better and in a more enjoyable way, which enhances adherence, which we all know is the most important thing. So maybe you find this valuable, and if so, comment, let me know what you think. Let me know some of your strategies to help with your caloric deficits better. And if you disagree, please let me know that too, although that will kill the placebo effect for me. So please don't do that, actually. I'm just kidding. But anyway, see you guys next time.